The account you are about to hear is drawn from my private memoranda of those years in which it was my singular privilege to share lodgings with Mr. Sherlock Holmes at 221B, Baker Street. Time has softened neither the clarity of his reasoning nor the quiet astonishment with which I, even now, recall his powers. The case I am about to relate, long withheld for reasons of discretion, concerns a murder in Brixton, a faint trail of blood glimpsed at dawn, and a chain of human errors more revealing than any weapon. I give it here exactly as it occurred, in the hope that the listener may follow, step by step, the calm and inexorable logic of the most remarkable intellect of our age. It was upon a gray and unambitious morning in early March of 1893 that I first became conscious of that peculiar stillness which invariably preceded one of Holmes's intellectual tempests. The fog lay low upon Baker Street, muffling the hooves of passing hansoms and blurring the opposite windows into indistinct squares of yellowed light. Mrs. Hudson had served our breakfast with unusual quiet, as though instinctively aware that conversation would be unwelcome. Holmes sat opposite me at the small round table, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin, his eyes fixed not upon the Times, though it lay unfolded before him, but upon some inward tableau, visible only to himself. His untouched tea had grown cold. "You have not slept," I remarked at last, setting aside my own cup. He smiled faintly. "On the contrary, my dear Watson, I slept admirably, but I awoke in possession of a problem, and such things are incompatible with digestion." I had long since learned that further inquiry at such moments was futile. Holmes would speak when the internal machinery had reached a satisfactory alignment. I therefore occupied myself with the paper, noting absently the small crimes and social indiscretions which passed daily for news in our city. It was a single line, halfway down the third column, that at last drew my attention. A body was discovered in the early hours of yesterday morning in Brixton Road. Circumstances, though at present obscure, suggest foul play. Scotland Yard has made no official statement. I tapped the item with my finger. "Brixton is becoming positively ambitious," I observed. "It was Kensington last week, and Camden before that." Holmes's eyes flicked to the paragraph, then away again. "Yes," he said softly, "and Brixton this time with a difference." I stared at him. "You have more information than the paper provides?" "I have more information than the police possess," he replied, rising at last and pacing the room, which, I may add, is not a particularly high bar. Before I could frame a response, the sharp peal of our bell cut through the fog-muted air below. Holmes stopped short, his expression sharpening. "Ah," he murmured. "Our cue, Watson." Our visitor proved to be a man of perhaps 45 years, spare of build, with a prematurely stooped posture and the uneasy eyes of one who has slept badly for several nights in succession. His clothes were respectable, though worn shiny at the cuffs, and he carried his hat as though uncertain whether to sit or flee. "My name is Harold Merton," he began, once seated. "I was advised to consult you, Mr. Holmes, by Inspector Forrester." Holmes inclined his head. "Forrester has the virtue of knowing when he is beaten. Pray proceed." Merton swallowed. "It is about my lodger, or rather my former lodger, Mr. Edwin Caldwell." Holmes's eyebrows rose a fraction. "The deceased gentleman of Brixton Road," he said. Merton's face drained of color. "You know, then?" "I know nothing," Holmes corrected gently, "but I observe that you did not contradict me." Merton clasped his hands together. "They found him behind the row of houses near Linton Passage, dead, stabbed, they say, and there was—" He hesitated. "A blood trail," Holmes supplied. "Yes," Merton whispered, "a thin one, as though he had walked some distance after being wounded." Holmes seated himself once more, his manner suddenly attentive. "Now we approach the heart of it. Continue." Merton drew a breath. "I dismissed Caldwell 2 weeks ago. We quarreled. He was late with his rent and—" His voice faltered. "He had a temper, sir. A cruel one. You fear suspicion will fall upon you, I said quietly. Merton nodded miserably. I live scarcely 3 streets from where he was found. Holmes's eyes rested on him with unsettling intensity. Fear, he said, is an excellent solvent of truth. Let us see what it dissolves in your case. Within the hour, Holmes and I were seated in a rattling cab, bound southward through the thinning fog. Holmes smoked in silence, his gaze fixed upon the passing streets. Note, Watson, he said suddenly, how the press fixates upon the wound, while the true significance lies in the trail. The blood trail, I asked. Precisely. Blood is a most obliging witness. It speaks even when the victim cannot. We alighted near Brixton Road, where a small knot of curious onlookers still lingered, despite the police cordon having long since been removed. Holmes moved among them with the casual air of a man merely stretching his legs, his eyes missing nothing. At the mouth of Linton Passage, he paused. "Observe," he said, indicating the stones. "Washed, but imperfectly. The rain last night assisted the culprit more than he deserved." To my untrained eye, the cobbles appeared uniformly dark. Holmes, however, traced an invisible line with the tip of his cane. Here the blood was heavier, the wound was fresh, there, lighter. The victim was weakening. "You suggest he walked," I said, "after being stabbed." "Not walked," Holmes corrected. "Staggered, leaning to the left. Note the smears against the wall." We followed the imagined path until it ended abruptly behind a refuse shed. "The final collapse," Holmes murmured. "Now, why here?" We spent the remainder of the morning in quiet inquiry. Holmes spoke with shopkeepers, with a lamplighter, with a child who had been abroad before dawn. Each conversation appeared casual, yet I could see the subtle net tightening. At last, we returned to the cab. "Not robbery," Holmes said decisively. "Caldwell's watch was untouched, nor chance violence. This was intimate." "You believe the murderer was known to him," I ventured. "Known and feared. Observe, Watson, Caldwell did not cry out. He fled. That tells us much." Back at Baker Street, Holmes spread his notes upon the table. "Caldwell was stabbed near his former lodgings," he said. "He fled toward the one place he believed he might find safety." "Merton's house," I said. "Indeed, yet he never reached it." Holmes's fingers drummed softly. "Why?" The answer, as so often, lay in what had been dismissed as insignificant. A narrow alley branching off Linton Passage, closed at one end by recent construction. Holmes returned there alone the following morning, emerging an hour later with the faintest smile. "Watson," he said, "when a man believes an alley to be open but finds it closed, despair does the rest." That evening, Holmes requested the presence of Inspector Forrester and Harold Merton. We assembled in our sitting room, the gaslight casting long shadows. "The murderer," Holmes began calmly, "was not Mr. Merton." Merton sagged with relief. "It was Caldwell's brother," Holmes continued. "A man he had cheated and threatened, a man who knew his habits and his fear." Forrester started. "But the brother was in Leeds." "So he claimed," Holmes replied. "Yet the blood trail shows hesitation, recognition, and the child saw 2 men arguing at dawn." Holmes turned to Merton. "Caldwell fled toward your house because he believed you awake early, but the alley he chose was blocked. He turned back too late." Forrester nodded slowly. "We have the brother in custody." When all had departed, I regarded Holmes with renewed admiration. "You read the mind as easily as a map," I said. He smiled thinly. "The mind, Watson, leaves tracks deeper than blood, if one knows where to look." And so ended the affair of the Brixton blood trail. A crime solved not by force nor fortune, but by the quiet accumulation of truths too small for others to notice, yet together forming a path as clear as any written in red upon the stones.